Hi there, Lalo. Can you hear me?
Hey, Katie. Yes.
I see that a lot of people are connecting. That's great. All right, we are just going to wait for a couple more minutes and we're going to get started here. How's your morning going?
Good. Just typical coming from one meeting to the next. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah, super excited too. Yeah, we've got an overwhelming amount of registration, and it's really awesome that everyone wants to hear what San Antonio ISD is doing. Super awesome. All right, very cool. All right, for the time being, I am going to get started. Lalo, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool. So good morning, everyone. I am super excited, actually beyond excited about this fireside chat because we've been working with as a team with San Antonio ISD for quite some time now. And it just amazes me to see the amount of energy, passion, and fearlessness to tackle really any problem in college and career readiness. Last year was a hard year, but working with San Antonio ISD, it didn't really feel like college and career readiness took a backseat at all, despite the fact that, San Antonio ISD isn't really a small district. In fact, it is the 22nd largest school district in Texas. COVID didn't faze them. And as a technology partner, I had to pull together this chat because finally, I think we all see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we can now finally look back and reflect on our experience. So that's the context. And without further ado, we have Dr. Eduardo Sesatty here with me, and he is the Director of Post-Secondary Initiatives with the San Antonio Independent School District. He leads a district-wide team of college and career readiness counselors and advisors that seek to increase the number of students who obtain a post-secondary credential. His professional and research lens focuses on the inherent assets and strengths within students of color that allow them to navigate educational institutions, often that are not designed with them in mind. Dr. Sesatty dedicates his career to ensuring students from educational underserved backgrounds are given an equal chance to fulfill their post-secondary aspirations. He firmly believes that all educators are social justice warriors that need to mobilize students' dreams, not manage their expectations, especially for those students whose families have been historically oppressed. Dr. Sesatty holds a PhD in educational leadership from the University of Texas at San Antonio, a Master of Public Health and Biostatistics from the UT School of Public Health, and a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from the University of Texas, San Antonio. Great, and let's give him a welcome. And brief background about myself and think probably people on the call already know me. My name is Katie Fang. I'm the founder and CEO of SchoolLinks. Not a big fan of bragging about myself. I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's get started. So I must say, again, it's a pleasure. And we have, I've seen such, a passionate and hardworking team at San Antonio ISD, and everything about college and career readiness at San Antonio, I would say, is very designed thoughtfully. So, Lalo, I guess my first question is, what do you think cultivated this type of culture, and where does this energy come from?
So definitely not me that drives all of it, but it really started with our shift in superintendency. Our superintendent Pedro Martinez, he's a strong believer of all students deserving access to post-secondary opportunity. He was the one that when he first came in 5 years ago, started implementing expectations for we want more of our students to go to and through college. And so little by little, he started garnering his team of people that agreed with that could revamp the district in a way that led us to that. I happened to come in a few years later in 2018, but back in 2015, he actually did something that probably was controversial at the time. He actually reached out to a charter school, the KIPP schools, to be able to learn about what their college counseling models looked like. And so I say controversial because there was this big campaign here in San Antonio of public versus charter. And I think the big highlight of what he did was he thought about the outcomes. He said, okay, I need more kids to obtain a secondary piece of paper. And so I need to sort of put all those politics aside and go after people who have had some success in doing that and learn from them and see what we could do in SAISD. So that's actually how I ended up with this role of post-secondary initiatives in this department. We sought out a partnership with Valero, which allowed us to pay for allocations for college-bound advisors. And that's where the role got started. That's where the work of we want more kids to navigate the process. It was never in doubt that students have high aspirations. That our kids have always aspired highly despite socioeconomic barriers that they face every day. Mm-hmm. It was always a matter of school staff maybe not necessarily the belief, but the how to. How do I help these students navigate this process? We have staff who's very dedicated to doing it. I think they just maybe needed some resources and a little bit of leadership to say, this is where we're going. Mm-hmm. So that's what he brought to the table. And so since then, a lot of the ways we have framed our work have been about how do I get more kids to graduate college rather than how do I get them to graduate high school? And that inherently brings up a different set of questions. I may be running the best AP program or the best CTE program in the state for the sake of being a CTE program. But when I change that to how is my CTE program or AP program helping to ensure more students obtain a second piece of paper, it really shifts what you look at as a program itself or as a department. And there's a lot of departments in SAISD that are shifting that way. So I was with KIPP at the time, then got the pleasure of coming over to help continue the work of post-secondary success for the district. And since then, there's just been a lot of alignment, a lot of alignment in the work, yes, but more alignment in the thinking. Alignment in the thinking that it is a K-12 responsibility mm-hmm. to ensure that students actually get a degree after high school. Not that they're necessarily just ready for it, but that we do more and more readiness and awareness so that they actually get it.
Can we dig in to your experience at KIPP a little more? Can you talk about the programs that you've created there, and then I also wanted to ask to help establish a baseline before you came into San Antonio ISD. What was the college and career readiness programming or the situation like?
Well, so. I'm not necessarily as familiar with what's happening before in SAISD, so mm-hmm. there's probably other people that could speak to that. But I think it was in the scope of the district lens, it wasn't as big of a focus as it is now. Mm-hmm. And so increases in dual credit investments, in P-Tech pathways, and CTE pathways we had a lot of CTE pathways. Well, we didn't have a lot. We had a few CTE pathways that were big, but they weren't resulting in certification. So we had to really think about, are we really having the right pathways that allow students to obtain some credentials and not just that they take the courses? And so when I first started, this was in 2018. My philosophy of how we should do this was really to provide a lot of what I keep calling interoperability. Is this idea that you can provide resources to schools and visions and metrics and handbooks, and then guide them through those so that they know this is not about providing services. This is about achieving outcomes. And so, one example I always gave to my staff is, it's not about the number of workshops that you do for FAFSA. It's not about measuring the number of times you have parent engagement meetings. It's about the results from those. Did I get 30 FAFSAs completed from those events? Because one of the things we learned was those FAFSA nights, they're great. They get some stuff done. But if you try FAFSA days, so basically parents can come in at any time during the day, you actually get more FAFSAs done. And so that's sort of what shifted our thinking is we're looking at that completion rate all the time and knowing where people are. The things that lead to that can shift. And before it was more about, we just need to have FAFSA nights and weren't really looking at the completion, just hoping the completion would happen. So for me, a lot of what I think I've been very privileged to bring to the table is this idea of focusing on the outputs and letting the inputs be flexible. The way I do things can be flexible, but the outputs are agreed upon, they're standardized, and we have pacing towards, we want to be at 85% FAFSA at the end of the year. Where do we need to be in December? Where should we be in November? Where should we be throughout the months to lead up to that? And so that's a philosophy that I was very lucky to be taught at KIPP, because there's a lot of output-based thinking, a lot of collaborative thinking, and a lot of servant leadership. A lot of, we are in leadership positions to make sure that everything we do, even if we're 4 or 5 steps removed from kids, that we are able to articulate why what we do will help kids. We might think a lot about how do we help staff? How do I help my department? But then there's that added or that missing piece on the sentence that say, I help my staff so that they can help kids in this way. And that was the second thing that I think I've been lucky enough to provide back to the district and to my team more directly about really focusing on outcomes and being thinking about measurable outcomes as the starting point, North Stars, and then working backwards to those.
Yeah, I think I definitely can feel that last year, 2020. It was a difficult year, but it just felt like every single thing that we were trying to implement and trying to do was very thoughtfully designed, right? Just talking about your inputs and how you're gathering data. Situation, circumstances change, right? But then the way that you guys adjusted and really quickly adapt to the situation, it really amazed me. So wanted to talk a little bit about more around the pivots and the adjustments that we made, right? Last year obviously was a different year than normal. So can we talk about the challenges that we faced last year that affected our CCR design? And then I want to break these challenges into 2 buckets. And one bucket, we can talk about, COVID-specific challenges. And then the other one, can we talk about the general challenges that will live, beyond just COVID?
Yeah, well, so obviously, and this is probably true of many other places, student engagement, because people have gone virtual, and it's a good thing that a lot of them stay virtual just because of where we were with no vaccines, with maybe lack of testing for school districts anyway. Obviously, that deterred a lot of our work. So you couldn't just pull a kid from a classroom to make sure that they were able to take the test or they were able to complete that application. So I think things just took a little bit longer when it happened. Obviously, for a lot of us, it just happened. We had to shift in a matter of days. And I remember talking to my staff about how the why doesn't change. When we first started, we said the why is going to stay the same. We still believe the work is important. The how is going to have to change, and we'll adapt, and we'll make mistakes. We'll have to readapt again, and we'll have to continue to make shifts. I think now it starts to feel like we can create some stability again. But for the last set of months, it's always been All right, so we have a new issue. We have a new issue. Now we have to make this new decision. Now we have to shift. We had to adopt some tools that we hadn't previously bought, or some communication tools that we didn't have in the past because we didn't really need to, and we just had to be able to adopt them quickly and start using them to engage with kids. So I think everything in terms of college and career readiness didn't really go away as much as it slowed down for us. So you can't test 40 kids for the SAT or the TSI in a single sitting because of social distancing. So you just test 5 at a time. So that takes a little bit more time. That's probably nothing that's very different from what other people are experiencing. And so I think what we really anchored to was the thing that allowed us to really continue to try to strive to conquer the challenges is we know our why. We know where we want to head. It might just take us a little bit longer now, but
Mhm.
we can, knowing that, it's easier to really configure the how. It's easy to just think about, okay, I got to shift my tool, I got to shift my conversation. I'm not pulling kids from class, I'm meeting them in Zoom because I'm still striving for this North Star. I just have to go about it from a different route than I used to. So I think those were some of the challenges. Another big challenge, not directly related to, but marginally related, was just technology, and that's probably not something that everybody's going to find surprising, right? We just don't have the capacity as cities and counties to ensure everybody accesses internet and technological devices, and so we had to shift. And there's a whole story behind this that I am definitely not a spokesperson to be able to tell it well. But we had to shift our plan from a 3-year one-to-one technology to a 3-week one-to-one technology, and we did it. And that was because, again, we really always thought about this is why we're doing this. So shifting the how gets a lot easier when you know your outputs, when you know what your goal is. And for staff, it feels a little bit easier, though still complicated, still frustrating, still challenging, but it doesn't deter from saying, well, we're going to lower the bar. And
Yeah.
that's what we didn't want. We didn't want to lower the bar.
So how did you manage that's crazy, a 3-year rollout plan condensed into a 3-week rollout plan? How did you manage, family communication and students' expectation? Because I know that usually when you do implementation, there's a lot of training involved and communication involved. How did you manage to get that done?
Yeah, so definitely not the expert on it. So there are some stories that have been featured of us about that. I can't think of the reporter or the news that did it, but there is something. You can probably go to our website and see it. It was a massive move that I am definitely not the best equipped person to talk about it, but I can tell you it's a fascinating story, and it took some unprecedented moves to do it. And I think we did it right. I think it was the right thing to do. We're positioned now to continue being one-to-one.
Mhm.
And so I think part of the purpose of reporting that out as a story was so that others could learn. So I would encourage people to see that, to just go to our
Awesome.
website and kind of look for it.
Thank you. And for the people who are in the audience, feel free to type in your question and in the chat or in the questions tab on the right-hand side, and I will be going through the questions periodically. All right. So we talked about the challenges you guys faced last year, and I'm also wondering. So now let's shift to the solution part, right? That's the fun part. And we needed to be agile, and we needed to think on our feet, and all the time. But and especially last year, we had to act really, really quickly and iterate on our solutions, right? Can you think of some interesting stories and unique solutions that you have implemented for these challenges that we addressed?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that was important when we first started to address, more specifically in times of when the pandemic kind of puts us all virtually, was we just needed to have more communication. So we just started to doing daily check-ins with our team. Right? We started to just meet on Zoom because actually my team was already meeting on Zooms prior to the pandemic, so it wasn't as new for us. And when I say my team, I'm advisors of the district that do the college access work. And so it was just a little bit of a seamless transition towards that, but it was a daily communication. There was so many things, and people remember this, there were so many things changing and so many new things coming up on a daily basis, decisions that district had to make within 24 hours or within 12 hours. And so we constantly communicated, here are all the things that are happening at the time. I think our worry, and this is like mid-March, right after spring break, when everybody kind of shut down. It was really about just making sure our staff knew that things were still happening, things were still going to happen, and we just needed to communicate more often. And so we would just simply do that through Zooms. One of the things that I knew was that we needed to stop depending so much on students connecting with counselors, because that would not necessarily happen as much. And so one
Right.
of the things that we did was we just took a very simple playbook from teachers who use, for example, Google Classroom or Canvas Learning to develop the resource hub of what it's on the mind of our advisors. And so walkthroughs of college applications of FAFSA, walkthroughs of what the TSI is, what the SAT is, how to prepare, little places to schedule appointments with counselors and advisors on how to do this work. And that was one of the big challenges that I think we faced, is we weren't necessarily ready to just say, oh, I'm just going to dump all this information in here, because some of our staff were actually a little bit hesitant to say, well, then how do they connect with me? And the idea was that we just needed to overtly share stuff. They would still connect with you, because the students might not know the entire nuance of a college application or FAFSA.
Yeah.
But it was enough to get students going. And so what was a similar challenge was that we created a whole bunch of stuff in Google Classroom. We had slide decks from Google that had what we were calling the virtual college and career hub, and that's sort of what our space in the schools is, a college and career hub, but it went virtual. And so my staff got good at creating emojis, at mirroring in the slide deck as if you were looking at the center, right? So the desks, the little bulletin board with announcements, the people, and they had emojis there, and that really helped us last year. Even though we shut down in March, we still had a really high FAFSA completion rate. That was actually because we started to do more intense work prior to the pandemic, but by the time we hit the pandemic, we were, I think, at about 70% FAFSA, but then it really slowed down. We only went from 70 to about 82% for FAFSA completion in the time period of March to May. And so I think that was one of the more unique things. We also adopted tools that allowed us to communicate both en masse and individually to students. As part of SAISD's work, we continue to follow with alumni after they graduate. So we needed a tool that allowed us to continue to do that, not just by the time they were in high school, but that we could easily transition, so that when they were in high school, the tool helped those advisors at that school communicate with their students. But then once they graduated, it allowed our alumni advisors to communicate with all the students,
Yeah.
regardless of their high school.
Yeah, I think San Antonio ISD is a big. You guys really voiced, during the pandemic, it was really hard to connect with students, and as schooling, so we had to just respond really quickly to your needs, and knowing that a lot of students probably feel that they don't know where to get help, and we quickly turned around the scheduling feature on the platform. So it was a really good collaboration, and we really appreciated that. So Lalo, I know that you talked a lot about inputs and outputs, and then I know that you are very thoughtful around designing the inputs and how we collect, the way we collect data. Do you mind talk a little bit about that? And I know that in different presentations I've seen this slide of the pyramid. I think it's really cool. Do you mind sharing that and talk a little bit more about that?
Let me share that. So I'll start talking as I'm trying to get this going here. I think that does it. Yeah, you can see the pyramid. Oh, great. There we go.
Yeah.
So input versus output. So one of the, and this is both related to sort of the measurable outcomes that lead to things in the future, but also, kind of our mentality that we want to do this for all students, and we want to be able to ensure that the North Star for every single kid regardless of whether they're the top kids and the GT students versus the special education students or English learners, that the entire spectrum of students had an aspiration. And typically, you would see that the aspiration, and we always talk a lot about this, we use terms like college and career readiness. And we often associate readiness with our ability to have students just be ready for college. So we're preparing them as if they're going to college. And that is true. That is sort of the right way to really think about the work. In our structure of how we philosophically think about this, we wanted to shift that North Star upwards. And so, all the time when you're talking to me and you're seeing me in a Zoom, you see this thing back here that says to and through. And that's sort of what we're thinking about, is our responsibility goes beyond high school. It goes beyond just saying you got a perfect score in your SAT, so you might be ready for college, and go ahead and do that. And so the alumni monitoring piece and how we kind of think about the outcomes further down the line, not necessarily innovative. A lot of very good public charter schools out there like KIPP and IDEA have been doing this, but we wanted to do this at scale. How could we adapt some of the things that worked in those smaller settings to a larger school district? As you mentioned, we're a big one. We're the third largest in San Antonio. And so we have about 50,000 students that we need to set this expectation for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what we ended up showing was kind of like a visual of what it could look like. Now, these numbers are not sort of our official percentages. I just put them as examples for people to kind of imagine what we're thinking. But I really wanted to emphasize what it leads up to. And one of the things that for the state of Texas happens is we have our school rating accountability. So we have what the state deems college and career readiness. And then we have what we also think it's important in terms of college enrollment. So right now, college enrollment is not part of accountability. It's part of the new wave of those CCMR outcome bonuses for those of us that know about those. But it's not really a way that they measure current schools. Like how many kids enroll in college is not in the school rating. That may be coming in the future, but it is not right now. And so you're always going to see us think about CCMR accountability. So that's college, career, and military readiness accountability, and post-secondary access measures. And so we're looking at things like applied to college and accepted to college and FAFSA completed and scholarship offers. And we're also looking at all the readiness pieces, right? All the things that are academic and socio-emotional preparation. And so that could be SAT, ACT readiness, earning certifications, AP exams, IB, pretty much the list that the state of Texas considers college and career readiness. But, you could end up in a scenario where you could have a lot of students who earn certifications, but because we're not really intentional about the work of navigating the college enrollment process, we have a lot of kids with certifications not doing anything else after high school. And that's what we couldn't miss, that the base of this pyramid is the work and the most of the responsibility that we have control over.
Right.
And then that doesn't take us off it doesn't take us off the hook for monitoring what happens next. And I think this is part of where we are really trying to dig deeper, and where I've adopted a strategy that I learned at KIPP, which was about developing those college enrollment partnerships. So we can have MOUs with colleges about college enrollment. So this is not dual credit. This is not P-TECH pathways or CTE. This is straight, how do we do better about getting more kids into that school, which we deem a school that either has a lot of our kids going, so we need to keep monitoring, or it's a high quality institution, high graduation rates, et cetera. And so we can start to really monitor what happens to our kids after, how many enroll, how many persist without remediation. And the end goal is that we see that, the class of 2020, by 2026, they have a post-secondary credential. And that is the end goal that we start with. We may not have a lot of control over that. We may be able to influence and get our kids more ready while they're with us. But the idea is that you shift your programming when you put that at the top of the pyramid, that for a lot of us, the base of the pyramid ends up being our top. And we just wanted to create this bigger sort of aspirational goal to say we can influence that up there. And this is a good visual to think about that. And so now we're able to say, for example, with our college partner, we can get back a report for how our kids are doing with their satisfactory academic progress, right? How many kids are meeting a 2.0 GPA and 75% of their classes that they enroll for. And for example, let's say that we see a trend that a lot of our kids that are going, they are failing college algebra at high rates. Well, then how does that inform what we're doing in our curriculum when they're taking math with us? And that's sort of the dots that we're connecting across. It's not just about enrollment and persistence. It's about the actual monitoring of the academic progress that really links back to the curriculum that we offer as a district and how it influences that. So our first step right now has been basing our curriculum on the rigor of the SAT, for example, because we know that's a higher rigor than our state assessment and our Texas Success Initiative test. So if we can meet that for our kids, the other two should be taken care of. And that's kind of the way we're really connecting these dots.
And then I see that questions are rolling in. And one question from Scott from Spokane Public Schools. And we have, can you detail some of the equity work you might be focusing on related to post-secondary readiness with students? I think this is very much about designing these inputs and outputs, right? Like intentionally designing how we are capturing not just the to, but the through college piece. Can you talk more about the equity work?
Yeah, so I have a small piece that I can talk about, but there is, so it says it's engaging in a much broader anti-racism kind of work. From a more higher district leadership work, and so there's more things happening there. For me specifically, what I think, and this is actually attributable to both schoolings and some of the work we've done, but what we really wanted to dig deep into is, can we look at these numbers by subpopulations? And are we really doing well by all the different subpopulations that we see? And so, for example, we know very well that our English learners are less likely to go to college than the general population. So now that we know that, we can start engaging conversations with the departments that are all around the bilingual kind of mechanisms of the district, and helping empower them to see the data, to create a story about the data, and then say, help us do better. And so how does the curriculum within bilingual departments can increase, can shift, can do better, so that we can see a change in English learners and their post-secondary aspirations? We do the same thing for our advisors. Are they really connecting with all kinds of students? Do we have equity across the board, that if you may have a little bit more time with the students in the lower end of the academic spectrum than with the higher end? Just because the higher end might need more attention doesn't mean that these kids down here don't also need more attention. And so it's sort of looking at average number of one-on-ones, right? How many times are you really meeting with kids on any set of the spectrum? And really using the data back to our staff, right? We do these things at the end of the year where we see, hey, we did great with FAFSA, great. But the number of times you met with FAFSA with the students at the top 10% was 4 times on average, but you only met 1 time on average with students at the lower end of the spectrum.
Right.
So we can't have that. So let's shift and let's talk about that. So specifically for me and the work of post-secondary access and success, it's really about continuously monitoring that these outcomes look about the same for any kind of subpopulation. And when they don't, the other big challenge is we don't have to do this ourselves. Because these kids are going through bilingual classes, or kids, for example, who are in JROTC, right? So where is the department that we engage with to show the data to say, hey, let's do this together? And I think that's one of our strengths here, is we are very much aligned to that mission. And therefore, when I have a conversation with a department that I maybe rarely collaborate with, it doesn't start with, hey, we think we want to do this. It starts with, look at this data point. This data point is telling us that the post-secondary outcomes of these particular students that are within your vicinity, they're not doing as well as others. So how can we work together to now make sure that outcome increases? And that's sort of the work of what I call data by subpopulations, or post-secondary outcomes by subpopulations. We actually share a report with our high schools to show them that. We can show them the class of 2020 enrollment now to the high schools, and go with the principal through a very simple protocol where we can see percentages of these subpopulations. And one of the fascinating things for principals is always to see a top kid who is not ready in SAT or TSI. And so how are they doing great on their grades, but then don't do well on the test? And there's a whole host of issues that maybe go beyond academics like test literacy. They may not be familiar with the test, etc. But it does prompt some thinking about, well, if they're not doing well at SAT math, what does that say about our math curriculum as a district? And how do we make shifts? How do we embed some SAT resources, et cetera, et cetera? But it really starts with, we just need to know where your kids are when it comes to post-secondary enrollment, because that is a measure that is beyond our control a little bit. And if we are doing better, that if that does better, then it says that we are doing better in particular academic outcomes.
Yeah, and we, as a technology partner, learned hyper monitoring from you guys. And it was amazing to see that, at every single stage of the pyramid and of the college and career readiness process, you always have a data strategy around that. And the other amazing thing that I think I discovered is that you have turned every single counselor on your team and a college access advisors into data catalyst, right? Like usually there's a lot of burden on data collection and just, trying to be data driven. Data driven is a really good notion, an end goal, but how did you turn that around to make it a strategy, to make it a requirement, basically a prerequisite for everyone to be on your team?
Well, so I think I first started with the notion that the more than data driven, we're data informed and mission driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just semantics, but I think for me it allows people to not feel like they have to become data processors, like they have to know how to be an analyst overnight. And it's not about that. It's about we as a department in the district and work with our data team, which do an amazing job of helping us analyze data, so that our staff on the ground, all they have to do is look at the aggregate percentages or student lists, and therefore they can make some informed decisions about where to go next. But one of the things that I do, at least with the team that I directly manage, is that we do these monthly check-ins where the anchor of the conversation is, tell me where you are with your college applications. Tell me where you are with your financial aid. Tell me where you are with this. And I can tell you it takes time, right? At the beginning, we were getting answers like, oh, we're doing well. Or yeah, I have a lot of applications. I have many kids doing this. And my coordinator does a great job of just stopping that and saying, you said many, you said a lot. You said
the actual numbers. Yeah.
Tell me about exactly the number that you're knowing. And so now, and this, I say a long time, but this really took, he started doing these check-ins this year. And so by the time now in February or January, they already know. They don't know when they're coming in. They're expected to know their data. Even if they just know it because they have to, it starts to realize the conversation about, if you don't know where you are, how can you be sure where you're going? And how can you tell me that by the end of the month, you're going to try to get this done if you can't really know where you currently are? And so it is an investment of time. If you are a counselor in this chat today, that is what I would encourage you to do, is to really know and ask yourself, wherever you are, if somebody asked me today for my particular metrics around post-secondary, would I be able to, at the turn of a coin, just say, here's where we are with FAFSA? Or would I have to spend time digging through data and going to places and asking people, or maybe asking the person that actually may be helping with FAFSA, because sometimes that's not necessarily the counselor, it may be somebody else. Would you, as a counselor, know where that is if we asked you today? And that is the key question that we often ask ourselves, is how do we help our advisors and counselors know where they are at any given time? It's a work in progress. We're not necessarily there yet, but that's the key question we try to answer, right? To a point where we say, yep, every single one of us. And I think Schoolings has played a role there, because that was the gap that we didn't have, is how do we take off the data processing from folks, from our school staff, so that all they have to do is, with a couple of clicks, get the percentage that they have for FAFSA, and then immediately with a couple more clicks, get the student list that allows them to continue improving on that number.
Good question. Yeah. I think in order to help students, we got to hold ourselves accountable. And obviously having that data at your fingertips will be really, really helpful. Okay, I guess let me just take a look at the chats. We've got a couple more. How are you able to have contact information of students during the pandemic with such low participation? So I guess, Jordan, from Houston ISD, well, thank you for attending. Would you be able to clarify your question a little bit? I guess what the question really is asking probably is on the alumni piece. How do we get information from alumni, from the seniors, to make sure that that we maintain that contact moving forward?
Yeah, well, and as we wait for Jordan to clarify, if it is about the alumni work, I think what I did was what we thought about is the actual process of college enrollment, and stop thinking about school cycles. So let's really think about how it takes the college enrollment process to happen. So it takes usually the whole senior year, right? But it doesn't end in May. And I think the thing that we really shifted to was we need to then have expectations of our staff to not only work with the seniors in June, and so that's the work of my college bond advisors. They have a basically an 11-month contract, and they work with with students in June. The big difference that we're starting to do now is when they come back in late July, early August, they are continuously expected to keep contacting seniors that just graduated, because really the end goal is census date, and census date usually happens in early September. And so we do take a lot of information while they're seniors about their contact information, their cell phones, their addresses, both from our registration database, but also we use tools that allow kids to text in so they can receive messages from us. So we collect their cell phones that way. And the idea that we did was we said, what we want to do, and this is for those of you that may be familiar with the National Student Clearinghouse data, we know that NSC data comes out until November of the subsequent semester, right? So kids graduate in May, and you might not know how they did until November or maybe early December after they graduated. So a whole semester has almost gone by before you can even tell how many of them actually went to that semester. So what we did is we said, okay, so we are going to have college fund advisors and to some extent counselors reach out to graduates from the time they come back all the way through September census date, which I think for Texas it's always like the second week of September.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically we shifted their cycle so that they could still work with alumni in August and September and a little bit in July. They have about 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off in July, and they continuously do what we're calling a college schedule campaign. So they have to reach out to kids to collect college schedules, which for us is the definition of a preliminary college enrollment. So it kind of gives us an idea of where we kind of are with enrollments even before the NSC data comes out in November. But inherently, what happens is you will have kids who say, "Oh, I don't have a college schedule," and so now you've created the condition for an advisor to say, "Well, how do I help you get one?" And so now let's work through all the troubleshooting of the college enrollment process. Maybe you're missing orientation, maybe you're missing a little piece of paper, verification documents, etc. And so you kind of anchor it to, hey, we just want to collect college schedules. But in the conversations, it inherently happens that you're also advising students because some of them are going to come back and say, I don't have one yet. And so we think of the advising process more as a, September to September kind of thing. Seniors in September all the way to when they're graduates in September, and then they can start to shift little by little to the next senior class for working on their future. But we're also then starting to create expectations for schools of what juniors should do. And so juniors should take both the SAT and ACT, and we invest heavily in the school days. So they take it while they're in school, both of them. And then we have advisors from the College Advising Corps that actually help them do their college lists. So part of the expectation is that juniors leave their junior year with a college list so they're better prepared to manage their time when they're seniors. We're trying to
Mm-hmm.
avoid both kids who only apply to one place and kids who apply to maybe 30 places because they need to, everything is a matter of time, right? How do you manage your
Right.
time? And if you can get to 30 college applications, that's great, but your bar should be more about 5 or 6. And then if you can do more, great. But we want you to not limit by just doing 1 or 2. And we also want you to prioritize your time by doing the first 6 that are most important and then knock out the other 20 if you want to. So it is both we keep contact throughout after, but the idea is that because we're asking ourselves how are kids doing after high school, then we start to plan for how do we improve that and what are the areas we can control. And that's one of the areas we keep advisors calling up until census date to ensure more of our kids actually show up day one.
Yeah, and I think from what I'm hearing is that there's really no way around. You have to build a process and ensure that the processes are carried out thoughtfully and diligently, right? And then starting the process early on the engagement piece and on building the relationship piece, so that you can get connected with students and ensure that no contact is being lost. So actually, we've got one last question there. I know that we are almost at the end of our time together. So Daniel from Jubilee, a charter school in Texas, asked about certification and job application. So I know that we emphasized, we talked a lot about the college to and through. And do you mind talk a little bit about, how do you get students to discover careers and think about applying to more internships and these type of opportunities?
Yeah, I would start to say that we're not necessarily where we want to be. One of the inspirations we got from Chicago public schools was one of their school districts was how they expect every single high school students to have an internship while they're in high school. We do some of that through the new model of early college high schools, the PTech models. And so that's specific early college high school certification or associates that a student can get. And we have 5 in the district now. And I believe we are the district with the most number of PTech pathways for the county, I believe. And so I think the idea for us, and I think Daniel points to this a little bit, is the idea for us is that if we try to go back to that, what else can we control? And so one of the things that we can control is ensuring that students have these certificate or associate pathways while they're in high school, so that when they graduate, they have more than just their high school credential. And therefore, when they get a job out there, they're possibly a little bit more competitive. Maybe, I mean, it's still competitive to get a job anyway, but the idea is that if they decide to continue their studies, they're not dependent on a low hourly wage job or like a minimum wage job and then go to school. They're getting some good paying positions, 12, 15, $20 an hour while they're doing whatever they want to do for school. And so that goes back to this notion of post-secondary credential, right? And what you might see in the pyramid is that there isn't a specific timeline for it. It's just what are the conditions and metrics that we follow so that our students can eventually earn a second piece of paper. And so one of the ways, obviously, is a student goes through high school, they enroll in college, they might get a certificate, associate, so they make their way through their bachelor's. But a new way might be, well, let's get them those associates and certificates in high demand and high wage jobs right now while they're with us. And we see in the research that that does prompt students to want to continue and get a higher education than what they have already. But they walk out of our doors more ready, right? They walk out of our doors with their high school diploma, great, but they have their certificate in cybersecurity, their associates in international business, and that allows them to have a little bit more. It's no longer anymore the associates in liberal arts with the intent to continue to study. It's the intent to continue to study with a degree or a credential that allows you to access or be more competitive in the job market while you're continuing your education after high school. And so that's part of the broad thinking. I'm definitely not the CTE or PTech person to lead that effort, and I'm not necessarily the most expert person about it. I am associated with it, and it does connect to all of these pieces, right? But in our view, we see that building up to this top of the pyramid, right? And so that's what I mean by shifting your question. When you're really looking at a different end goal, you most definitely will have to think differently about the way you do things, because you have you're aspiring to do more. And sometimes it's challenging, and sometimes we have our own challenges about whether some of these things we can even do. But I think what we don't shy away from is trying to do anything about it. We say, let's try it. Let's see what we can do about it.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So I know that we're running out of time, but we've got one last question from Juanita from Austin ISD. How do you manage the internship and college hours students need to complete for the associate's degree? Many times taking 12 to 16 college hours in a few high school courses.
I am sorry to say, Juanita, that I'm not as familiar with that process. It is not something that's within my purview, but I do see how actually how schoolings has helped us with that, because I think part of the the reason why we really decided that this partnership was worthwhile is we see the integration of some of that abilities to host internships and count volunteer hours or internship hours within the system. The knowledge that I have about how they really process that for our early college, high school models is still barely small for me. I most definitely, and I don't know if my contact information is out there, but if you really want to talk to somebody that does that, I can help connect you. If that is something of interest for you. But I'm definitely not as knowledgeable about that specific area.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Lalo. And for those of you who have signed up, I'm just going to type my email address here in the chat, and happy to share the recording and also Lalo's contact information. Again, thank you so much. I hope this was informative and educational for everybody on the call, and thank you for taking out time from your busy schedules. Thank you again.
Thank you, Katie.